what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again, 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 again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again, 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 again.
All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. This is your host, Chris Quinn. I'm still getting used to the reset after my, oh boy, I think it was quite the hiatus. It was supposed to be a nice little vacation, a nice little COVID staycation, but that kind of never ended. So here we are, and we've brought it back. So thanks everyone for tuning in or watching us once again. And thanks as always to Lumpen Radio. For those of you who are new to the show, this is, we've been doing the show for about, I think like 4 years now, maybe even more. And it's a little insight into, well, one of the things that I like most about being in the beer industry, and that is getting a group of people who are passionate about beer, who've made a beer a part of their livelihood, a part of their lives in one way or another, and talking about beer. So with that, I'll get to my guests. I'm excited. There's some fun stuff to talk about, some late breaking news. Good thing, because otherwise it's a slow news day. So I really don't know what else I would be doing. But we go by some things have not changed. You know, some things on the show have, some things haven't. But one thing that hasn't is we introduce our guests in order of seniority, that being how many times they've been on the show. Boy, I do not know who is it you, Josh? Are you the senior member of the show? I think you might be. Mr. Josh Noel.
11th time on the show is my guess.
Whoa, that's
maybe
a lot.
9th. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe
well, that's
8th,
a lot.
something like that.
Well, how are you? What's new with you, man? It's been a while since you've been on the show.
It's been a while. It's been a while since everything. Nice, proper glassware there. Looks like it is also clean.
Yeah.
That is craft beer clean right there. Well done. Everything's good. You know, just dealing with same stuff we're all dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But we're dealing. So, yeah, it's good. Thanks
Cool.
for having me. It's nice to see you guys and look forward to doing this in person in 2023.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully. Knock on wood. Don't jinx us. So my next guest is Mr. Chris Fernari. How are you? What's up, man? Thanks for coming on. You're still in your workout clothes. I was talking to you earlier today or texting with you, and you said, sorry, I got to go run.
I've showered since. Actually, you know, I got to thank you because I discovered a new feature. I don't know if it's like the new iOS or something, you know, the new update, but you texted me while I was on my run, and I had Siri talking in my Beats headphones. And then she said, would you like to reply? And so I voiced to texted you my email.
Oh, and it worked.
And it worked.
Yeah, it worked. So that was great.
Yeah.
I discovered that feature last week when I was in my car, and my phone was connected to Bluetooth, and all of a sudden in Siri's the Irish accent that I have it turned on to just for no good reason, just with no warning, just started saying over the car's sound system a completely expletive-ridden, filthy text from a friend of mine, and I was like, wow, I got to turn that off, because that could have been really, really bad if I wasn't alone in this car right now. So, it was very funny. I was glad that it happened, just because it was hysterical to hear it. But yeah, I guess that's a new feature that is going to get people in a lot of trouble, I think. Or if you're not a degenerate, be useful.
I had no idea that it existed or that I had it set up. So
Right.
Here we are.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. And then we have you're a new guest, are you? Wait, have you been on before, Alexi?
I'm we just say long-time listener, first-time caller here.
Whoa. Okay. So here's the deal. We have a first-time guest, Alexi. First-time guests introduce themselves. So tell everyone who you are, please.
Yeah. My name is Alexi Front. I've been in the beverage industry for a little over 10 years now. I've worked at most notably a really well-known beer bar here in Chicago called Local Option. I think we'll be probably getting into some of the memories from that place and from that era of beer today, which I'm excited about. I also have a podcast called Heavy Hops, which Chris, I was really stoked that you were able to join on for the short time of about 3.5 hours and 3 bathroom breaks. And it's pretty awesome.
And I've had people come and talk to me about that. And people outside the beer industry, people inside the beer industry. And yeah, I was like, wow, if I had known so many people were going to listen to it, I might have reined myself in. But for people who listen to this show and think I can kind of like just kind of not hold myself back, I really didn't hold myself back on Alexi's podcast. So if you ever want to know, all my deepest, darkest thoughts, and just how cynical I can be for how long, listen to Heavy Hops.
It was episode 10. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Jeez. Wow. So
that's where we go for the straight dope.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you like, there's a ton about the music industry in that podcast as well. It does touch on a lot of aspects of culture that myself and my colleague Sam find very interesting. So go check it out if that's your thing.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. Well, thanks for coming on. It's going to be, man, we've been talking about having you, like you and I have been talking about you being on this show for years, literally years. Yeah.
I think from the onset of the podcast. So yeah. I'm really excited that we finally made it happen, and I'm really stoked for the agenda too. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So we'll get into it with an old classic, which is, what have you been drinking lately, or what are you excited to be drinking? You know what? I'll go first. I don't always, but there's 2 things. One that I'm drinking and I'm excited about because it's one of my favorite seasonal beers is Alpha Claws from Three Floyds, the original black IPA, the proto black IPA, kind of black IPAs before they existed. Super hopped up porter. I'm excited about that, and we'll get into it later. But I've got some Dree that I'm going to open up tonight as well, and I'm excited to be opening that too. So,
nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who's going to go next?
I'll jump in there. I got a beer from Mast Landing called "This Beer Is Everything," and I bought it.
I know what that is. That's from a TV show.
Well, see, I figured it was. I don't know what TV show it's from.
It's called I Think You Should Leave. It's a Netflix show. Okay.
Well, I loved the artwork, so that's pretty much exclusively why I bought it.
For straight up theft, intellectual property theft.
It's parody law, right?
I suppose.
So yeah, that's it's a double IPA, double dry hop, double IPA. It's okay. It's not my favorite beer that I've ever had, but I like the can.
Okay. So you were excited to drink it because of the can. Got it.
Well, and I typically like Mast Landing stuff. So I've had a number of good experiences with their hoppy beers, and I said, hey, this will probably be good too. It's not my favorite of theirs, but it's good.
Yeah, cool. Cool.
Chris, can we talk about IP theft at some point in tonight's episode, just for a little bit?
Sure, I'd love to.
Yeah, actually, I had that in my notes for our notes to bring up as a topic. So I'm glad this came up.
We've talked about it in the past, but
I want to present a counterpoint.
Cool. I'm down. I'm down.
By the way, if
you can really get me going on that, so we'll see.
If you think IP theft is bad in craft beer, wait until you see what's going on in cannabis.
Yeah, I think IP theft is actually awesome in craft beer, and everyone needs to take the pine cone out of their butt on the subject. That's where I come from. I think if it's done cleverly and funnily, not a word, but you get my point.
From the writer guy.
And it's some small brewery, and it's, a 50 barrel batch, or probably even less. Probably, let's say it's some 15 barrel batch of beer that's probably never going to be made much again. Who cares? Just laugh at the joke, man. That you don't have to get all upset about everything. Craft beer Twitter.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where I come in.
Man, do we want to? Are we going? Should we just go right into it? I mean, you haven't even talked about what beer.
The beer I've been enjoying lately is called bourbon.
County.
Actually, this year's Bourbon County it's a strong lineup. I think they've fallen into a pretty heavy malaise in the last few years, and this year is strong. Even the ones I didn't personally want to drink a lot of, because it's not so much my thing, I think are well done. I think that I don't think there's a loser in the bunch. So a tip of the cap to them this year.
Are you only saying that because you were able to get free bottles this year?
No, I call them as I see them. As far as the beer that I don't know.
Did they send you beer this year?
They did. I was part of the media tasting this year. They invited me back in.
You're back.
And look at it, and it's already paying dividends for them.
That's right. Yep. They sent me all the beers. And
you want a good review? Just let them come.
$5,000, and I liked all the beers. What can I say?
Mm-hmm.
No. They. If you look at the other coverage thus far, you'll see that some other beer writers agree. So, I think it's safe to say that there's a growing consensus that it's a good year for Goose Island's Bourbon County, no matter how you slice it. And I am glad they did not invite me to the media tasting last year, which I wrote about and still found a way to review the beers. You can Google that one if you want. But I was glad they invited me back. I think it's just, I don't know, better that way for everyone, I think. And tasted them with an open mind and a good year.
Favorites, come on. What are the favorites?
Oh, from that crop?
What are the ones that I should be getting extras so I can flip?
Boy, I really like the one made with tea and honey, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah?
I think it's going to be really polarizing, but I really quite enjoyed that.
Okay.
The one of the barrel ones, I think it's Birthday Bourbon County. That's going to be hot with the nerds. Get a lot of that. The nerds are going to want that.
Okay.
And then I liked the tea one. Oh, and the coffee maple one was good because it's not too sweet. And this is really where I'll underscore where I think Goose has righted the ship. They've gone way too sweet with these beers in the last few years. To me, I think they're just
me too.
Wildly out of balance and sweet and slick and chocolatey and bleh. And the coffee maple one, which is called Special Number 4, to me was kind of the real test case.
Which I was worried. I'm worried about that one.
I was too. And the maple is really in a very, very supporting role, to the point where I think some people will complain, bro, not enough maple.
Exactly.
But to me, bro,
the
coffee is doing the heavy lifting. It's good. I'll be curious.
I'd
love to hear your thoughts on it, Chris. But
okay.
You haven't tried it yet?
No, I haven't tried it.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it ahead of time for the past couple of years.
Do you read into that?
Yeah, you can read into it. I just when you're surrounded by beer all the time, this year's Bourbon County is I'll get it. I don't need to. I wouldn't review it anyway, so in my opinion, I don't think matters. Maybe it matters to somebody, but like I don't care enough to do it. We'll see when it comes out, and I'll taste it. I don't even think I tasted all of them last year. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. It's just it doesn't hold the same interest for me anymore. But if it's turning and changing, then that original, I mean, I could be, or the coffee oatmeal stout, are the two that I think I could get behind and like buy a couple of them if they're available on the black market. It's the only way I've decided. It's the only way I'm buying beer now. I'm only going to buy beer on the gray or black market, or bourbon, or sneakers, or anything if possible.
You have a dealer?
Pretty hipster.
Yeah. I don't go through retail. I only want to do it via message boards, because I think that's really just, you know, the way that it was intended.
We have to get rid of the illicit market for beer. It's really eroding the integrity of the business.
I want to get rid of the illicit market. I want it to just be an illicit market for things. I want hype to to dictate price, and for things to be created to be hyped. So.
There's actually a good thing about hype creating a price means that a lot of mediocre stuff attracts a lot of attention, which leaves a lot of good stuff at
not
a
brewed a
price
second batch
for people who don't follow hype.
True, but I don't think it's actually working that way. I don't think in practice it's actually working that way. Another argument another thing I've talked about many times before on the show. I've been told I'm wrong, but now I'm being proven right. The amount of stylistic variation is just dwindling. It's starting to come back finally, but
especially within the IPA category, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially with
the variation of the same 3 hops used in the same 7% beer that every brewery is making. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I had a beer on last week called Amalgamator. Is that what you're drinking now, Alexi?
I am, yeah. I was actually going to give a little shout out to Beechwood. I actually first had their beers at the Shelton Brothers Festival in Portland that you were at as well, Chris.
Yeah.
And I really think that they're doing exceptional West Coast style IPAs. It's a testament to, sticking to your guns and specializing.
Yeah.
At that, to answer your earlier question, I do enjoy these packaged beers that Be United's been putting out in cans, and my wife and I have both been enjoying the Dul Tev from Dodola in 4-pack cans. Phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that stuff's amazing as well. But what I was going to say is it's funny when that Amalgamator came in once last year and now this year, some people are trying it and just like they're surprised that like a good West Coast IPA is really awesome. And I'm trying to say to them, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure a good brewery making one batch of West Coast IPA a year will be fine. But if you have somebody who's been making it and specializing it for 10 years or however many years on the West Coast, it's going to be really good, and it's a good style of beer. And we've been killing it with that beer, and people have been loving it. And I've been getting, texts, people just being like, wow, this beer is awesome, which I do not normally get that sort of text from people. So that to me it's frustrating because I think there are so many beers and styles of beer out there that people just aren't interested in trying because it's not one of the 4 or 5 kind of styles that they think, all good beer kind of fits in that kind of in there. But
do you have now, Chris?
Sorry, what's that?
Do you have that in the store right now in cans?
Amalgamator, yeah.
That's where I got it. Yeah. I think it takes a good curator. It takes a trust in the retailer or the establishment in order to get people to try these things out. I think Amalgamator, it's not 100% West Coast IPA that I remember from maybe like 2008 or 2009 with the use of Mosaic, but it's definitely dank and resinous and citrusy. I mean, to really,
it's a modern one. I think it's a modern West Coast, but I think it's definitely West Coast. Like I had a Port Mongo the other day. Sucker was bitter, man. That sucker was bitter.
It's tough, but if people are driven by sensation, and if they want a wow factor in a similar way where they want those enamel ripping sours, maybe it is a good time for West Coast IPAs that have that bitterness and that dry quality that's actually going to lend a surprising amount of drinkability. And these beers are 7% instead of 9 or 10% too.
So Chris, I said something about well, should we just go into IP theft? You said no, we have to, but I didn't catch what you said.
We were talking about Bourbon County, right?
No, wait before that.
I wanted to make sure that Alexi had a chance to talk about the beer that he was drinking.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Was that it, or was there another beer that you wanted to talk about, Alexi?
Well, I was going to kind of tag on to the barrel-aged stouts from local breweries tip and say that I really enjoyed the Deeth's Tar from this year as well, which I didn't need to be on a medium ale to get, and you could get at the brewery and at your store too. And I thought that it was really good. I mean, I had a conversation with Marty, who oversees the barrel program, a couple of weeks ago. He said he was pretty stoked about the barrel stock that he had access to this year. And he's an honest guy. I would never think of him in any other way. I thought it was phenomenal too. It was really beautiful, like marshmallow, chocolate, luscious character that, better part of 15% being totally hidden. And like pretty accessible too. Like the heat was pretty well hidden. I thought the maple variation was really good, and I'm looking forward to the coffee variation too.
That's cool.
They're pretty consistently killing it right now. They're really that barrel program at that brewery has really become a special thing in our backyard to have.
Totally.
And
absolutely.
After them.
Josh, what do you think? Like, if I would say in a lot of like people of our age, and Alexi too, and maybe you, Chris, who've been drinking a lot of Bourbon County for a lot of years, like what would you put as like the golden years of Bourbon County, of not of the series, but of just like the actual stout, the base stout?
I would say the base stout has actually stayed relatively consistent. I think they have run into more trouble when they've tried to get cute and do berries and cocoa nibs and fill in the blank, whatever. Okay. I don't think there's been a year where the base stout has been a complete zero by any stretch.
Not a complete zero, but do you think it's been
it's skewed sweeter, if that's what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying one way or another.
I think that's always retained enough identifiable barrel character and bourbon character to. I think it's held its own pretty much.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
I think the variants are where they've really gotten into trouble. When you talked about the golden era, though, that's an interesting question because I immediately thought to sort of the whole Bourbon County experience.
Okay. Well, then how about for you? Well, what's the golden era? I think I know. I think I have an answer.
My window isn't tiny. It's, sort of like 08, 09 to probably 12, 13, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I was going to say probably 9 to 11 or 12. What year did Rare come out?
11, I want to say. Or was it 10? No, that was 10.
10. Yeah, I'd say 9 to 11 if I had to like really narrow it down. Mm-hmm. Was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing all 3 years. Like legitimately excited. They all came out and all of them were like, all right, I've never had a stout like that before, and it's also good. like
It was
really
it was
good,
a
which is
cultural
pretty cool.
phenomenon. Like they really created something there that was pretty exciting, you know. And it
Yeah.
was
How long have they been doing the Black Friday release? I feel like that was
2010, I think, right?
yeah, this is the 10th anniversary. So I think it's this year they have anniversary Bourbon County Stout, and it's a nod to the 10th anniversary.
Of
But-
Black Friday.
of Black
Yeah.
Friday.
And they sort of took that idea, as was explained to me, from Dark Lord Day. Because it's like Floyd's had this brilliant idea to turn a beer release into a big party. And Greg Hall at Goose Island was like, well, we should do that. And they did. And now everyone does it.
But it really became sort of a thing a few years later, I feel like, where
You
they
mean more
expanded
broadly?
production, and then they, got all the retailers on board with, releasing it at a certain time that morning, because it kind of used to just be a Benny's thing. Then it got, more widespread around like 2013 or so, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well,
Yeah, about the
growing and growing.
definitely about the time that that people began to line up for beer releases, and I think that it all just kind of perpetuated itself in a lot of ways. I think that the 8, 9, that era was phenomenal as well. Those beers aged phenomenally too over a really long time, in the ways that 12 aged well, but 13, 14, 15 not as much. And I would give them a lot of credit to that. I think that some of the 13, 14 actually drank a little bit better out the gate, but didn't age as well, whereas 8, 9, 10, 11 aged exceptionally well. Actually, 8 was the first Bourbon County, first barrel-aged beer I ever drank. I thought it was super gross, and then I rediscovered those beers in the back of my fridge several years later, and I was really, really happy that they had been perfectly preserved there. I do think that Black Friday definitely played a part in building line culture, but I think that was accentuated by other facets of our consumer culture.
Yeah, I mean, people are just wanting all that stuff, going online, hyping up things on forums, stuff like that. So,
are you talking even more broadly, Alexi? You're talking like Apple products and stuff like that in terms of like feeding into the Bourbon County mania?
I think that once beer got to a certain point where its consumption was widespread enough, it became susceptible to trends that were occurring in more, I could call them general public consumer spheres. So lining up for Apple products, I mean, that happened. That's been going on for longer than Bourbon County. But I would say once craft beer became something that was more generally drank, then people applied those consumer habits to craft beer.
I'll buy that.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I will buy that too. Why don't we transition? I'm going to get another glass real quick, or another beer, and then we'll transition it into the next story. So just like maybe a minute or so. I'll be right back.
Sweet.
Yep.
Everyone check the news and see if there's a new president yet.
Hey, Josh, I was going to ask you, how was that wheat wine? I was really curious about that.
The one with the apple flavor in it?
Yeah, apple caramel. It sounds like it could be really great or a hot mess. I'm curious as to what your thoughts were.
I thought it was well done. Not something I'd drink a ton of. I went in with pretty low expectations. I sort of assumed it would be a hot mess, but they really sort of, it's probably the most impressive thing about it is that the apple flavor and aroma was really pretty authentic. For a pretty kind of silly gimmick, they executed it pretty thoughtfully, I thought. And again, it's fairly balanced, not too sweet. I thought they pulled it off for what they're going for.
Yeah, that's awesome, because apple isn't necessarily a flavor that I'm looking for in that particular style of beer, and sometimes in higher alcohol beers, it's an unwanted flavor. But it's awesome that it came across in a genuine way. I was always a little bit fearful that steering away from barley wine in general wasn't really the best choice, because I think they hit some home runs with barrel-aged barley wine, but they have to change things up, I guess, in some way. The whole line has changed and has gotten more expansive over the last 5 years.
And they
All
seem
right.
to think that that's
Finish your sentence, and then we'll start it up officially.
I was just going to say, I asked him at one point, I was during the tasting, because it was a Zoom thing. I was like, you guys have gone all over the map now. What's like over the last couple of years, like turning coffee into coffee barley wine, and then coffee maple and wheat wine with apple. Like, and they're like, that's what we need to be doing. That's what people want. And we don't want to be stodgy in any sense of the word. They're trying to be sort of progressive and cutting edge. And I think there's obviously a fine line between being sort of forward looking and being and
being reactive as well too, right?
But so they're sort of walking this fine line, but they pulled it off this year.
Yeah, it's like not being reactive, not being a caricature. You know, like it's you want to be a leader, an innovative leader. It is tough.
Mm-hmm.
It is tough, especially when your consumer is also kind of changing as well. Like how they came into beer. Like the people lining up for Bourbon County now are probably not the people who were lining up for it before. They got into craft beer from a very different place. They have a very different experience with barrel-aged beers. They have a very different experience with adjuncted barrel-aged beers and multiple adjuncted barrel-aged beers. And, you know, it is funny because, you know, I mean, Southern Tier has been making those beers for a long time. I mean, they were kind of like the OG pastry stout place, and it was available. And there were always people who loved it. I mean, there would be people who would like, oh, I love the mocha or the chocolate or whatever. But it was kind of like a novelty thing. You know, it wasn't really ever considered to be something to be, I don't know. It just wasn't considered like in the upper echelon of kind of, I don't know how to put it. But then that's changed now, you know, where the best versions of that are like the most sought after beers in among the most hardcore seekers of hard to get craft beer. It's those, like, you know, adjuncted, whatever it is, it's adjuncted. I mean, I don't think there's a beer that doesn't have an adjunct in it that's probably even anywhere close. Like, because now you have your, like, yeah, we'll come back.
Are we recording for the show or no right now?
We're recording. Yeah, I'm not going to turn it off the whole time.
Oh, is this going to go in the show right now, what we're talking about?
Why? You going to say something you don't want on the show? I mean, we can take it.
Well, I can just not name names, but there's a guy I work with who's big.
Don't name names, yeah.
I wanted to name names because I wanted your opinion on this beer, but it's so a guy I work with is pretty big into the trading scene, and he told me that there was this maple stout that recently came out as a collaboration between two breweries. He said it was a cloying disaster, and that there was a lot of pushback in those circles, which I thought those circles were very into those adjuncty beers and the beers that are wildly out of balance and sweet. But he said this beer pissed everyone off because it was so sweet that now there's this like beginning of backlash against the adjuncty stuff in those circles, and people are now, and then you've got what's the side project doing, like BBT, which, you know, God bless them for really focused talking about like base beer and meeting oak, and like that's all you need, you know. So it seems, just sort of reading between the lines, it sounds like the conversation is maybe starting to pivot just a touch away from like more sugar, more adjuncts is good, and head back to a more,
you still have those slushy beers, you still have, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, and not that things have changed completely, but just that the conversation is starting to take on a little more nuance. And
I
he
hope
said
so.
that at least in Chicago, this maple beer was a real turning point for a lot of people and made them just say enough is enough.
Yeah.
I haven't had it, so I don't know. But
yeah, we'll see. And you can tell me when we're not officially not on the record, you can tell me who the breweries were so we can all just talk. All right. We're going to do IP and how much you love IP theft, Josh, or do you want to go and talk about some of the other news that came?
We can do that. I'm curious to hear what Alexi has to say because he was pretty fired up about it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, my bottom line is I just think a lot of it is funny. And I mean, if you're really injuring someone's livelihood, then that's a problem. But, you know, if some little 3,000 barrel a year craft brewery has a little fun with the Heinz 57 ketchup label, who cares? I mean, just relax, everybody. And part of the thing that really is so strange to me is that beer Twitter, which, you know, all Twitter is just increasingly garbage land, but but beer Twitter seems to just get so enraged about this IP stuff when, again, I think 95% of it is just a little, you know, it's worth a chuckle and everyone can move on.
Sure. I mean, I'm not, I have to be honest that I'm not really one that spends a lot of time on Twitter. I do follow some blogs and I do know about enough about what's going on out there to know that there are people that are either using candy bars in beer and opting the branding and putting it on a can or mustard and, you know, directly evoking likeness isn't really a new thing necessarily. It's something that has been used for marketing, and it's not really something that's exclusive to beer either. I'm just kind of, the curiosity that I have with it is more about the larger brands protecting their marks, and I'm kind of curious as to how they view this in the sense of, if you look at it, and this is a smaller example, but a good one, and that is Stone protecting its mark in every way possible. Now, there's a huge distance between Stone and Nestle or Stone and Nabisco, but still, you have an example of brands that are seeking to protect their marks as much as possible. I was just kind of curious as to how a larger company would view this and why I haven't seen a great deal of attention put on those companies, or if these are batches that are so small that they become insignificant. But I think
that's what it is.
But these large companies have to have lawyers that are trolling the internet incessantly for any possible point of litigation. And what happens to that small brewery if they make that beer and actually it goes pretty crazy and they realize that they've created a monster?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think, and you know, I'm far from an attorney, but my guess would be these are known that they're going to be kind of like a one-off batch thing, because that's also part of the culture now. These are like one and done things. They're going to be a small batch. By the time they get a C&D, it'll probably say immediately stop selling this product. By the time that letter has written, this tiny batch, because these are hype breweries, it's gone. The beer is already gone. It's already sold. And then so the attorneys then could say, okay, well, now you have to, like, are they going to start, okay, it's over and done with. It's all sold. Sorry, we're never going to sell it again. We don't have any more. And I guess the attorney they could really start going after it. Like, I've heard Disney will do things like, well, okay, now we're going to you account for all the money that you made for this. And, you know, we want, you know, and sue them essentially. But the amount of money that costs for most companies isn't worth it. It's just like, don't do it. Now you have a C&D from us. If we do it to you again, you know, then we're going to go for it. And I think the little breweries know this, and it's now part of their understanding of how it works. It's, you do it and you sell it so fast that it's already done before. I mean, they've gamed it. I think they've gamed it how that can be done. For what you were saying, Josh, you know, making fun of the Heinz 57 thing.
Well, let me jump in real quick and say, C&D is almost a badge of honor at this point, because then they can throw it up there on Instagram and it's almost becomes part of the story.
Right. Oh, yeah. I would be surprised if there aren't some breweries out there who are just like trying to get C&Ds for certain things.
Is there C&D brewing yet? Have we looked?
I mean, there's several of them. They're just not called that.
Right.
But if you look at their marketing strategy, I mean, that to me is when it's like, when you're, man, it's like that. It what do they say? Like, intent is however manyths of the law.
9/8.
Yeah. 9/8. Okay. I think that's it. Like, if you're going to have fun, that's fine. It's just, for me, frustrating. It's not frustrating. It's not the right word. It just strikes me as just so lame when you're selling beer based on just like nostalgia of like, oh, I used to like that Atari or Nintendo game, so I'll buy that beer, or stuff like that, where it's just like, even Fernari's that can could have legitimately been like, that is my favorite skit, I love it, I want to put that on there, and in a weird way, I'm cool with it. It's something where it's like, okay, well, which label are we going to rip off this time? Like, okay,
Yeah.
Cool. Take that font. Take this like, and it is a system for many breweries. It's just like how they operate now. I mean, there are breweries where it's what they do is take a thing, rip off the name, rip off the label, and put it out.
I think what you're trying to distinguish between are the companies who are, drawing inspiration from something, a Netflix show or whatever it is, and creatively deploying it in the artwork that they're creating for their beers, the labels for their beers, and then the companies that are, blatantly just ripping off an iconic brand for very specific reasons. They're trying to create the illusion that they've partnered in some way, or they have some affiliation with this brand. And they're selling off of the mark. And you look at examples where there are companies that have partnered legitimately with brands like, what was it, Oscar Blues and French's Mustard or whatever. I think that's what they're going for, but they're missing the partnership part.
Right.
And so, I think everybody's probably fine with this. I have no idea what this scene if it exists, what it's supposed to mean. I don't know. I have no idea. I thought it was
people who aren't listening or watching the video version of this. It's from the show. I Think You Should Leave, the boardroom scene where that weird old man with the long hair, that crazy old man guy. So anyway,
this is an example of kind of doing it creatively. You're probably right. This is probably the one-off batch, and I don't know, maybe they will run into some issues. The flip side is that, maybe the creators of that show will say, hey, that was really cool that you used our,
yeah.
But when you go and rip off, I don't know, Twix or In-N-Out Burger or whatever. I think In-N-Out Burger was one. I don't know what other ones have been ripped off. I mean, that's blatant. You can't do that. You should have your own brand.
And then there's other ones, and I don't know the intent. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but one that just looks on its face to be just really rubs me the wrong way was a collaboration between two New York breweries, both of them, craft breweries, pretty trendy, definitely marketing savvy. It was Other Half and the one that Pipeworks often collabs with. I can't remember right now, but they collabed on a German Pils, and they took the Rathaus Pils label, which is a very cartoonish label, the same thing, but instead of a girl, they made it one of the brewers. They had the Pils say the same thing, different color pattern, but the same, like a couple different bright colors, same font and stuff like that. For Rathaus Pils, which I'm sure was also maybe like, oh, we want to make a beer like this because we love it. But Rathaus Pils also has this like a little bit of like a cult status in New York. It's by far their biggest U.S. market. They're not a huge company by any means. I mean, they're a big brewery, but they're not massive. They're a privately owned, I believe, German company. And those other two breweries are like savvy enough. And it's like, man, you're selling this in a market this other beer is available in, and you could have made a German Pils, but you're selling it based on that mark, and it's going to be in and out, and it's just not, unless they had like talked to Rothaus and been like, is this cool if we do this? And they're like, yeah, that's cool. Thanks, man. That's really awesome. You're doing it, which maybe they did. But unless they did that, it's just like, man, that is just not cool. It's not cool to do that sort of stuff. And I don't know. I think I just have a pine cone up my ass, Josh, like you were saying.
Well, goes back to, what about intent? I mean, what if it is a one-off, and what if it is homage, and what if it leads to a bunch of conversations in the tap rooms, like, customer comes in, oh, what's this? And then they say, oh, well, this is, the label's inspired by this other beer that we really love and inspires us, and you should check it out.
Fair enough.
Sure, there's definitely value to the perspective that this can then lead someone towards the original with a case like, with something like Rothaus, or with niche products as well too. I think ultimately, if I were to develop a brand, and if it were to be something that stayed in my family, or if it were to carry something unique and very sentimental, and if I were to see someone taking my brand and lifting the likeness and doing something with it, and if I had spent all that time and effort to preserving it, I don't know. I don't think I would feel all that positively about it, and I don't think I would see it in the light of it being all that funny, unless there was, as Chris mentioned, a bit of consent in the relationship.
Sure. Which, hey, maybe that had happened, but I just, things like that kind of rub me the wrong way. But I guess
there was a local example here. I think you probably know this well, and if I'm get the details wrong, let me know, Chris Quinn. But Mars did its Chug Life. Is that what
Chug Life? Big time.
An homage to the most ripped off brand in all of beer, and quite possibly the greatest brand in all of beer, Miller High Life. And Mars did it in this sort of thoughtful, classy way, I feel like, where it really was pretty clearly homage rather than ripping it off. And as what the story was told to me, is that the Miller Coors folks were basically okay with it because the homage factor came through. I mean, in terms of anyone who looks at the label knows what it is and what it's referencing, but the fact that it was also done with respect also came through, and Miller, as a result, sort of tipped their cap to it.
Sent them a case of beer.
Yeah,
in fact, of High Life with a note on it.
It can be done well, and it can be done tackily.
Sure. And that's
again,
a good
I think
bring
that
up.
goes back to intent.
Right. But if Chug Life became a big flagship that they started to grow their brewery around, that would have to stop. I bet you at some point High Life would say, that's cool, but you have to stop.
And that's
which
fair.
Is fair, I think. I think more than fair. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about some sad news that came out today, for me anyway, in the beer world, which is that Shelton Brothers was well, I mean, they're dissolved, and they're bankrupt and going to be liquidated, it sounds like. So something I had known about, maybe you had too, Alexi, for a little while, but it still sucks that it's, official when you see it in writing and stuff like that. Yeah, man, it's rough. I think it was just incredibly important part of the growth of American craft beer. I think it's hard to really overstate its importance in getting craft beer to where it is right now, believe it or not. Especially for some of these biggest, like you were talking about side project. I think without Shelton, there may not be a side project.
Do you want to explain for the listeners and viewers, Chris, a little bit of the backstory?
Yeah. Sure, I will. I'm guessing if you're listening to this show, you probably already know, but Shelton Brothers is an importer of beer. So there's the 3-tier system, as we talk about here a lot. There's the supplier, the creator of the beer, which is the brewery. There's the wholesaler of the beer, which is the distributor. And then there is the retailer of the beer. And
which is you.
Yes, which is me, which is a store or a bar or a restaurant. And more those areas are being graded, but that's generally what's called the 3-tier system, and it's mandated by law in most cases. But there's this weird little 4th tier, which is the importer. So a distributor can import directly, as there is a couple of distributors, at least one distributor here in Chicago that does. But often breweries from abroad will go with an importer who will essentially represent them in a country, and they will have a portfolio that they will go around to multiple distributors around the country and say, do you want to sign a deal with us? And now you have rights to our book. So it's like a distributor for distributors in a way. And it's very much like a distributor among distributors, because Shelton also kind of pioneered the idea that, hey, we can also do this for non-foreign beers. And they started doing distribution for not just beers not made in America, but also, well, Jolly Pumpkin, very famously. I had an interview with Ron Jeffries of Jolly Pumpkin back at Shelton Fest in LA, when it was in LA or Long Beach. Right by Beechwood. And he said Shelton Brothers saved his company because of the distribution footprint that he was able to kind of do with them. So they, COVID, I think, crushed them. And they, were hurting. And then for people here in the industry in Chicago have known that for years, they have been in a lawsuit. They've been in multiple lawsuits. The Sheltons,
it's part of the problem, right?
Seem to always
Dan
be
is very litigious.
Very litigious, or people are very litigious about him and his dealings. Dan Shelton, the operator of Shelton Brothers. And I've heard of multiple lawsuits in multiple states and stuff like that. There was at least 2 that I knew of in here in Chicago, and one of them, I think it was like, it can go no further. You've lost. Pay us $2 million. And I think Dan Shelton at that point moved to Germany, as I was told. So, I think that happened, and that was happening while COVID was happening. Now, that lawsuit had been going on for, oh my gosh, a long time. And the funny thing is, so they were, Shelton Brothers was under one distributor here, Windy City, which just consolidated. And then they then left and went to this, to River North. Windy City sued them. Then Beer Temple opened. And then shortly after, Shelton Brothers left River North. And River North sued them. And River North consolidated with Lakeshore, which is one of the 2 main houses left that we talked about last week. And it finally went through. So, they had to pay them Money. They didn't, I guess, leave on the right terms. And, that's one of the things in distribution is that you're locked in, baby. I mean, they've got you. So Shelton Brothers is as we know it is bankrupt. I mean, maybe it will continue on in some form, but there is, I think, a lot of meat on the bone of this story to talk about because there's so many ramifications for people who are passionate about that corner of craft beer.
And so the big question is what happens to those brands, right? You have a sense of that?
I have no sense of that. And I've been so busy, I haven't even reached out to anybody at these breweries, even to be like, boy, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty shocked if Be United had not approached brands because this had been a known item for a very long time.
Be United is another importer, yeah.
And Be United is also specifically an importer that works with breweries from a lot of different countries. Whereas if you look at a company like Artisanal, their portfolio expands to about 4 or 5 different countries. Global and D&V are basically 1 or 2 countries. Shelton Brothers is, 20 plus countries. I looked at their inventory today, which you can still find on their website. There were 72 breweries in that portfolio, and 26 cideries or meaderies, and about 400 different SKUs. So there's quite a substantial amount of inventory there, and a lot of product from a lot of different people. And I think the United's pretty well suited to pick up some of that product based on how they do business and
how they're doing and what
and their innovation too. At the top of the show, I was talking about I was alluding to their tank program, their facility in Connecticut, their packaging stateside. I think all that stuff is awesome. It's not right for every producer in the Shelton portfolio, but at the same time, we didn't think that would be right for a brewery like Dizzola at the same time. So it's it's exciting that there are importers out there that could bring some of this stuff over, but there's a ton of great beer that I'm afraid is just not going to come to this part of the world anymore and is going to probably lay waste in Massachusetts. And there's a lot of things that are really unfortunate about this, but the biggest is that Shelton Brothers and their brands really informed not just consumers, but the beers we drink today. There were so many brewers that went to Europe and tried those beers and then found them here, or found them in the US at a craft beer bar, or had their aha moment with one of those 72, or at a time it was more like 100 different breweries. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we're losing is this wider perspective on beer and this immediate connection to culture too, that portfolio was so honed in on.
Oh, absolutely.
I have a question for both of you. Does the current consumer interested in that connection and interested in those beers right now?
I think we're at kind of a nadir of the interest of that, but it's not gone. And I think it will come back. I'm because the people who are into that stuff are very passionate about it. I mean, there are still certain, bizarre beer to guards that when we get it in, it's like, oh, wow, that case lasted half a day. Mm-hmm. And it's, so they're there and they're like, whoa, okay, that's here. Well, I don't know when I'm going to see it again. I guess I'll just buy everything. And they just, take it all. So those people are still there, and they're very much not those beers are for them to drink. Those are not for, and if it's for anyone else, it's as a gift, like a surprise gift. Like, look what I found, man. Here you go. You can have one of these beers. So it's a different type of consumer, not better or worse, just different. And so I think the fact that it's not currently exceptionally popular is not good for these breweries getting picked up. And once they're not picked up, then you got to do the legwork of, going over to Europe or wherever they are and finding them. And that's one thing that Shelton Brothers did too well was finding these esoteric little breweries in every corner of the world and signing them to an import deal. I mean, that was their book was a hot mess. I mean, yeah.
They were the original shoe collectors, weren't they, Chris?
Right. Yeah, they were.
And I think that there's a couple things that can happen that can turn this around. And one of them is representation. I think that what we're talking about that happened in Chicago, Chris, was probably like a real exaggerated example of what may have happened in other states. If we're talking about 4 different wholesalers in the state of Illinois from 2009 until 2020. And that creates a huge problem for buyers such as yourself, or when I was a buyer too, is that there were times where there'd be gaps in the portfolio, or when product would be available, a ton of communication that maybe a less astute buyer would be less inclined to jump through the hoops to accomplish. And that then has effects down the line to consumers. And I think that the representation aspect of someone like Ron Extract leaving Chicago, and he was a major part of what built Shelton Brothers in Chicago.
Yes. Now at Garden Path, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that having someone who can be an evangelist for these brands can make a huge difference, because ultimately we're talking about high-end product. Chris, you sell high-end product too. You know, a $12.99 4-pack is a high-end product. Just in the same way that a $7.50 of beer is a high-end product too. Yeah. So I think that the representation, if there isn't a company like Shelton Brothers, maybe the representation falls on the breweries, the Dovetails, the Metropolitans, the breweries that are taking some of these examples of the styles that these Shelton producers had executed so well, and had, you know, Dovetail and Metropolitan creating their examples of these styles. Now things turn again, where those breweries can have a platform to talk about these other breweries that they were inspired by, and to do some of that legwork. It also takes having an Omnipolo in your portfolio, which is what 12% has. And so maybe it's a matter of someone picking up that brand that can have resonance in the US, and then allowing that to be an anchor for other brands. Certainly whoever picks up Cantillon, they're not going to sell, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of cases in every state, but they will garner attention.
That is like the most cachet, maybe the most cachet brand in the world. I mean, maybe even just in terms of pure cachet, it's probably number one, right?
It's what you do with that. And who else do you bring with that? Do you bring De La Seine? Do you bring other Belgian producers? Are you an importer in New York that can now bring in, maybe it makes sense to bring in True du Diable, or the Three Musketeers, or Brasserie Dunham, or these other Canadian breweries that are part of that portfolio. So it could get split up.
So many, but I think it's crazy.
But I think that there is a market. There's people that are interested in beer, and they're willing to pay money for it. And I think that it comes down to people speaking up about it, and for people to actually represent it in some way, and to give it some credence.
Yeah,
I think for me, I mean, obviously, you know, there's gonna be some importer who's interested in some amount of these brands, you know, whether it's all or a handful or whatever. There are plenty of other importers out there. I think the big question for me, and, you know, I'm just not super well versed on how importer arrangements work. You know, is it going to be like a, you know, like a distributor arrangement where there's some sort of franchise type of clause, or not? You know, like, are they going to have
Shelton stuff is all handshake, man. I really do, which makes it even more difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, then you have this situation where, you know, like, who's the arbiter of ranking these brands in terms of value? You know, I think beer geeks can sit there and say, well, clearly De La Seine and Cantillon, and let's not forget that Shelton Brothers was the importer who brought West Fletcherin into the U.S. Many years ago, and I remember when that was like a super big deal. I bet if you told like consumers now that some rare Belgian beer, Abbey beer was coming in, they'd be like, whatever,
Whatever.
Like,
Yep.
but that was a big deal back in like 2012 or whenever that happened.
Well, it was because it was the number one ranked beer in the world at the time. It was all. But,
I mean, people used to. I went to Belgium and I brought a bunch of bottles back. Like I remember people used to do that.
Yeah.
Some shop that was illegally selling it in Belgium. Like.
Yeah. That's what everyone did.
But that has value, right? Like that's the type of thing that I would imagine you should assign or ascribe some value to. But I don't know if that exists, if these are handshake deals and, if some importer would say this is worth, I'll buy the inventory and I'll pay whatever for the right to have the entire US. And then what sorts of arrangements do those importers have with distributors? Because they all have different distribution networks. So they're going to have to unwind existing ones or keep them and move them. Their distributors are going to want them. So it's kind of a mess. But look, the bottom line is a lot of these brands are going to be coveted by a lot of people. So I would imagine that they'll still continue to be distributed in some way by some importer who finds a way to figure it out.
I hope so. Maybe 12%, who's gotten really out of the importing game, it seems like. But Be United, I think, is an excellent call, Alexi. And then there's others out there as well. But for people who may not know out there, like kind of the cultural significance, I would love to just take a few minutes and just talk about like some of what this Shelton Brothers, the breweries that Shelton Brothers have brought to the United States have kind of meant for beer. Obviously, there's Cantillon. I would say they have Shelton Brothers has and Cantillon and Drie Fontaine have really created the sour, and Jolly Pumpkin have created the sour beer market in the United States. So Sea Quench, I think you could probably trace all the way back to these crazy esoteric sour beers that Shelton Brothers was the first one to really push. Now there were others as well, other importers doing it, but the first to really capture this kind of romance or mystique were those guys, were those heavy hitter lambic breweries, and then you had the wild breweries and stuff like that. I would say the rustic farmhouse ale. We had Mike Shalau on last week, who does Is-Was Brewing. We've had people from Jolly Pumpkin on. Sean Hill from Hill Farmstead. Without the beers coming from Blaugy and Thierry and Fantôme. I mean, Fantôme is a direct, almost like causal brewery for places like that I just mentioned. I mean that tart saison it should be called like the Fantôme style saison, because that was the first one that was like doing anything like that, intentionally or not. But he would have magic in a bottle sometimes when he would get it right. And the other option was Saison DuPont, which is not what is inspiring Hill Farmstead. It was Blaugy, it was Fantôme, it was Thierry. Those were all Shelton products, every single one of them. And now you're talking about like some of the most like cached breweries of a certain era, and then start talking about hype, start talking about marketing and branding. And then you have McKellar. I mean, like the king of all time of that, I still think. Also a Shelton Brothers beer. I mean, the influence that McKellar has had far outweighs the amount of beer that brewery has ever sold in the United States. I mean, like multiplier. I mean, you could look at a beer shelf 10 years ago, and I think McKellar would still stand up today, even back then, where probably hardly any other brewery would be able to. But like they were so far ahead of just branding and also just like rapid new. I mean, those are the first ones that I know of that was doing that, Alexi, that like just like rapid fire new stuff. Now we have this. Now we have this. Now we have this. That's become the norm with like eye-catching graphics on the labels and stuff like that. Doing lots of collabs, lots of novelty things, putting crazy stuff into beer. All that was McKellar was doing it before anybody else, even before Omnipollo.
Yeah, but that's what they write about in the Good Beer Hunting piece that Kate wrote, was that McKellar was part of that portfolio, and then they opened their brewery in San Diego and said,
"Yeah, sorry,
see you later."
Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, I mean,
I mean, this is an important. This whole conversation's like a really nice sort of obituary, you know, and puts it in a really important context.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's where are we now and where is it going? And has that business model sort of just been left behind by local and hazy, and McKellar literally evolved out of it, as explained in that article Chris referenced. It's a different era now.
It is.
Yeah, I would point to a brand called Brewski that's a part of Shelton's portfolio that began to produce beer in the U.S. And I do think that there were breweries that were a part of what we could call like third wave producers that are a part of Shelton's portfolio that make up about a quarter of their portfolio, and some of those actually could have done some decent volume if they had developed relationships in the U.S. and began to produce there in the way that Omnipollo or Evil Twin have been able to do. I think that's one of the things that 12% has done really well, is that they've shifted their model quite a bit from being the importer that brings in Jägerhopke or Hoftendormal or Amelis, and now they are the brand that houses Omnipollo and Evil Twin and a number of domestic producers. And I think that Shelton's producers were on the way with that, but Shelton merely provided the framework. They weren't actually involved in doing as much of the heavy lifting because they were so focused on the 50-state web of distribution and lawsuits and things like that. Whereas 12% has played it totally differently, and they've been really successful. And I'd argue that their brands, though some of them are a little bit more Americanized in some way, those brands do carry European flair. They aren't farmhouse producers, but they do offer some taste of that. And so I think that not all is lost here necessarily. I think that there could be avenues for someone like Brewski to continue to produce in the U.S. and sell through a wholesale network, which we've seen their products here in Chicago. They are a brand with cachet. I think that, I really can't underemphasize enough the fact that the fact that these beers have, in a way, influenced brewers that are now making these beers that we're talking about, that are shoe collector beers. But
like Terrace Boulder, sorry.
Yeah, but I kind of wonder if we were to poll these brewers and actually ask them if they liked what, and this is maybe shifting the conversation a bit, but if we were to ask them if they liked what they were making, and if we told them to make what they wanted to make, then maybe we'd be looking at something a little bit different. So I think that there's still value to the portfolio. I think there's a ton of value to the experience. I don't think it's necessarily, there's nostalgia that's a part of it for those of us that were there in the moment for it. But I think that there's ways to continue to bring these flavors of great importance and to allow people to continue to experience them.
Man, that is a very interesting hypothetical to debate how many breweries are making the beer they want to brew, because that was the whole thing, Josh, that like American craft beer was like built around. Like that wasn't that like literally like founders like motto or one of them anyway for a while. It's like we brew
Brewed for us, right?
Brewed for us, right? And it's and it's funny, like so many of those breweries that I've mentioned, like with the big cachet, you know, you have your Jester King and your side projects and your Hill Farmsteads. Were brewing the beers that they wanted and that they loved. I know at least one brewery that I won't name, although I don't know if they would care if I named. That's, you know, a friend of the show and wanted to brew those beers, but has really not been able to brew them at all because what sells is, you know, what sells is what sells. This is not who I'm talking about, but I would say Jerry Nelson to some degree.
That's who I thought you were talking about.
I'm not talking about Jerry Nelson, but I will add Jerry Nelson to that as well. That big loudmouth. You know, I think he's got an appreciation for what he brews. But I was out there last weekend having, again, some of the best barbecue. Josh, if you have not been out to Junanay even to get the barbecue, it is unbelievable. It's like smoke level. All right, anyway.
Is it as good as Brooklyn barbecue, though?
I don't know. Probably not, because it's from Brooklyn. And
because
you know,
Brooklyn barbecue is taking the world by storm. All right,
I'm sure if it's from Brooklyn, then it's obviously the best.
Sure.
Yeah.
How's the well? So Jerry's a little lukewarm on those pastry stouts and.
No, I mean I think he appreciates the unique skills that it takes to make them better and this and that. So I think he likes them from that way. But when I saw it, what he was interested for me to try was, you know, like a Belgian pale that he had made with dry hop, which was, by the way, exceptionally awesome, and really, really great. I mean, his triple is awesome. I mean, those are the beers that speak to him, and he's continued to make them, which is cool. But I think, Alexi, you make a great point. I mean, is part of the soul kind of leaving maybe craft beer a little bit the fact that these people who are making these beers, I almost said stouts, is it not really their passion? Is anyone's passion really a double slushy IPA? I visited 450, by the way.
Can you afford passion in the land of 8,200 breweries?
There you go. I mean, that's an excellent question. I think it's probably a luxury that only a few can afford. Right.
Well, why did they start?
Because brewing is fun. Beer is cool.
Well, I assume people start because they want to do something that they enjoy, right?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I mean, the breweries Penrose is a great example. They started 7-8 years ago now, and they were like Jerry. They were going to make Belgian styles, faithful Belgian recreations in Chicago, and they just won a GABF medal for their hazy pale ale. You know, I mean, like both those breweries had to pivot in a major way toward contemporary tastes, and went somewhere very different from where they started. But I don't think anyone today is. I mean, starting a brewery today to focus on Saison or focus on, you know, other classic Belgian styles is, I mean, that was maybe a rational business plan 7-8 years ago. It's not now, and I think everyone knows that.
Yeah, I was talking to a brewery owner.
Couldn't you just make the argument that they were passionate about brewing in general? The styles were sort of secondary. I mean, yeah, they liked, maybe they had a preference, but I think, I don't know, at least like going back to my home brewing days with my friends, you know, decade plus ago, it was like, oh, we're going to brew this weekend. What are we brewing? And like, it didn't really matter what we were brewing. We were just excited to brew together. So I would imagine that most brewers started from that place, and they still get excited when they make something that tastes really great and that a certain percentage of the public is going to enjoy.
I definitely get that vibe from like places like Maplewood, who are just like, they enjoy what they're doing. They enjoy that people like what they're doing. They like the innovation. They like all that stuff. I definitely get that vibe from them. It's funny you were saying what you were feeling when you were a home brewer. It just shows what just like a total piece of garbage I am, because that's not at all how I was. I was like, these are the styles that I cannot get. This is what I want to brew. I'm going to brew a special bitter because I'm a jerk, and that's what I would brew. And then my second batch was a dunkel, because I'm just a weirdo. So maybe I'm just not, to me, hours and hours of cleaning was not really fun, but it was worth it to be able to get a decent damn bitter that, because you couldn't get any of them. But you have a good point. I mean, I think everybody gets into it for different reasons. I'm sure it's a huge spectrum.
I would say that the through line probably for the majority of brewers is that they fell in love with and I'm talking about the people that are making the beer, not the people that own the breweries. They fell in love with the process of producing an alcoholic liquid. I think there are definitely, beers that they prefer to make and that they prefer to drink, and that they, would love to see have more representation in the marketplace. But I don't know that they are less passionate about making, a new hazy IPA versus making a Pilsner or versus a Dunkel. I think that they probably find, some excitement in getting up and just brewing every day.
I think you're probably right. And I also think that, there could be so many things. There's a few. I wonder if there's a difference in, the brewer-owned breweries, meaning like, I am a home brewer, I'm opening a brewery, I'm going to do this, versus I want to open a brewery, first thing I have to do is hire a brewer. So there's plenty of both of those. I wonder if that has anything to do with it. I will say I was with it talking fairly recently with the owner of a very well respected, very crafty brewery, who said to me in pretty much no uncertain terms, if I knew this was what the market was going to be like, and this was the pressure to brew these types of beers, I wouldn't have started the brewery. I mean, it's just like, if this is what it takes to be around, I wish I hadn't done it. But there's no choice, because I have debt, I have loans, I have employees who have families, I have, but like, he still, I gave something away. But like, he still had passion for certain types of beer that he continued to brew and stuff like that. But just to watch the beers that he was passionate about, this is not a Chicago brewery, by the way, just lose, but become harder and harder to sell and make less and less and less of it. And then having to look at like these beers that he is passionate about, just not selling it, knowing he could make other stuff that would sell better.
This is a person who's actually brewing every day, that owns the brewery?
He was literally brewing when I was there.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, because what you're saying kind of reminds me of some comments that I've heard from Tommy Arthur out in California at Lost Abbey. It's like, I think Tommy Arthur would love if all of his wonderful, amazing beers were more popular too. But the market sort of demands that he sells, hard tea.
Right. Right.
Like, that's just sort of the reality. And I think he's, he's probably given into that. And maybe he's not as excited about it. But I think if you were to ask Tommy, you know, do you still love brewing and would you start a brewery if you knew that this was going to be the market? I think he would probably say yes. Like, that's still what I would want to do with my life is, you know, be in beer, be a brewer, be, you know, be a part of this. I don't know. That's just my take.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I think we're probably all right to some degree. I think that it's all of it, a little bit. Man, you really did send us off on a tangent, Alexi. We were talking about Shelton Brothers.
Just returning the favor from when you came on
bring
my
it
podcast.
all the way back for the close here.
Right? Exactly. Why don't we take a little bit of a break now that Josh has just gotten back? And what are you drinking? Just straight vodka now? Is that what's in that glass now, Josh? Gin. Okay, cool.
That's craft seltzer.
Yeah, there. I mean, if you don't think I knew that, Chris, I know what he drinks. I know what Josh drinks. Let's take a minute
I drink a ton of seltzer.
Yeah, I do not. Well, I drink seltzer, but not with alcohol in it. Do you drink alcoholic seltzer, Chris?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But what's your favorite?
I really like the Truly lemonades. Some people don't like them because they taste too sweet. But I think those are good. I've tried a lot of the like regular, you know, White Claw types, and they're just kind of not great. But yeah, like I would say during the summer, you know, out on the boat or whatever, like out on the beach, sometimes those just hit the spot. You know, you need something cold and refreshing, and you don't want to be all weighed down. It's almost like pizza, you know. There's certain pizzas for different moods and experiences. You don't want like a super heavy pizza if you're going to be going out. You want maybe just a nice light thin crust pizza. And yeah, there's a time and a place for every beverage, and every pizza for that matter.
Okay, there you go. Does anybody else, before we go on break, does anyone else consistently or even occasionally drink hard seltzers? I don't.
I'm a big fan actually of the Spindrift with a shot of gin in it. So that's just
there you go.
Just hard seltzer, and it's very cold and refreshing. That's a warm weather thing for sure. Spindrift definitely changed my life, and that with a shot of gin, you can drop it in any flavor basically. Put it over ice, and it's going to be delicious and probably better than pretty much any hard seltzer you can buy off shelf.
Okay. Interesting. I don't know if I've had a hard seltzer. Maybe I've had a sip or two since the time you and I had a whole bunch of them, Josh. So.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Soda, man. I mean, it's just
a year.
Right.
So what?
Brilliant concept.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just vodka soda in a can, right? Called hard seltzer, and some flavors, and it's blew the
doors off of everything. All right, we've talked about that plenty. Let's take a break for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back. Thanks, guys. So, welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am Chris Quinn, and I am joined by my guests, Alexi Front, Chris Fernari, and Josh Noel, who is tired and wants to go home. Or wants to go log off. You are home.
All I have to do is just walk out that door.
In not a beer clean glass, not exceptionally beer clean. Yeah, it's pretty good. I've got my classic lambic glass here with some Driefontein in honor of Shelton Brothers. So I'll pour a little bit out for them, and cheers to them. So, Chris,
the beer sharing aspect of doing this live, I will say that.
Yeah. It was better. It's better live. I mean, for us anyway. I bet you people like to see how we're all just kind of sitting here as we're talking, but I think people do enjoy the video aspect of it. Maybe I'll have to keep that going. But so Chris, you brought something to my attention, which I did not even know about. Could you kind of tee off this last topic?
Yeah. So, you know, worlds collide for me. Cannabis firm buying a brewery, which I think.
Oh, so yeah, say what happened. Say yeah.
So a Canadian cannabis company called Aphria, publicly traded on the Nasdaq, as many Canadian LPs are, purchased Atlanta's Sweetwater Brewing for the deal's valued at $300 million. So $250 million in cash, $50 million in Aphria stock. And I guess there's an earnout. Sweetwater shareholders can earn up to another $66 million if they hit certain targets. So a pretty sweet deal. Yeah, pretty big deal. And it's funny, like in cannabis, it's not that big of a deal from where I'm sitting. I mean, it is noteworthy, but I don't sense the same, sort of Twitter eruption that you would get in the beer world when something like this happens. And in fact, the outlets that I've seen cover it are like, oh, wow, this is interesting because a cannabis company is buying a beer company. And what we've seen to date are beer companies investing in cannabis companies. So this is flipping the model on its head. It's fascinating. Basically, Canadian companies that are publicly traded on an American stock exchange that legally can't own cannabis assets in the U.S. So that prevents them from buying a U.S. Multi-state operator or anything else. In your guys' neck of the woods, that would be like a Cresco, for instance, Cresco Labs. And so those companies, they go to the Canadian exchanges to be traded. Everybody's waiting for federal legalization. Obviously, on election night, we had 4 states go. Arizona, New Jersey, Montana, and South Dakota just went for adult use cannabis. So 15 legal states now. 36 medical states with the addition of Mississippi. South Dakota also went medical as well. You heard about the blue wave. It's the green wave. Cannabis is happening. I think it's a pretty interesting deal for Sweetwater because what I understand is Aphria is setting itself up to be a consumer packaged goods company, and cannabis happens to be one of those consumer packaged goods. So first and foremost, they're buying Sweetwater to be in the beer business, it sounds like. And it's sort of a hedge, right? I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but
No, go for it. This is interesting.
So Canopy Growth, which is, Aphria says it's number 1 in Canada. Canopy says it's the largest, but Aphria is profitable and Canopy is not. Canopy is backed by Constellation Brands.
Okay, so that's the one, the Constellation. Got it. Okay.
And obviously, for the listeners that might not be familiar, Constellation owns, Corona and Pacifico, and they at one point owned Ballast
Point. Made a ton on that one.
Yep. So they're in pretty deep into Canopy, like $3 billion or something like that. Canopy has a deal with a New York company called Acreage. So the deal basically states that when laws loosen in the U.S. federally, Canopy has the right to acquire Acreage, but it hinges on something happening at the federal level. That doesn't necessarily mean federal legalization. That could be Safe Banking Act, which would allow cannabis companies to work with banks.
Right.
Just something that loosens it. You look at that deal and you have effectively Constellation, a Constellation-backed company saying, we're going to own a U.S. cannabis firm once it becomes legal. What Aphria is doing is saying, we want to be in the U.S. cannabis space, and we're going to do it through an alcohol company. And in the meantime, we're just going to, make it part of our balance sheet. It's a profitable company. It's a profitable business. And we're a consumer packaged goods company. So if legalization were to never happen, we still own a profitable company. Whereas if legalization never happens in that Canopy deal with Acreage, well, then there's no deal. And Canopy is not in the U.S. market. You can still make CBD drinks. That's, something that's legal in some states. A lot of beverage companies have pushed ahead on that. Kind of pointing to the Farm Bill and saying, well, we can do this, even if the rules are a little unclear still from the FDA, but they're getting clearer. So I think CBD will be the first step. They'll be able to make CBD drinks, and maybe you'll see some Sweetwater CBD drinks or something. And then they can bring the Sweetwater brand, which is, 420 branded and all that. They can bring it to Canada. And they get production capabilities. They get not only Atlanta, but many people forget that Sweetwater actually bought old Pyramid brewing equipment out in California years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, or I'd forgotten or whatever. Wow.
They got equipment just sitting in a warehouse out there. And it's like capable of making 400,000 barrels of product.
Okay.
So if they wanted to start pumping out, cannabis drinks, they could fire that thing up and start making cannabis drinks and selling them across California under some, subsidiary or whatever, because now they own the equipment. So a lot of options on the table, I think, for a Fria, pretty rich deal, but at the same time, maybe
huge
not.
deal. I mean, I'm surprised that they paid so much for them. It sounds like the pricing for buying breweries was going down. I mean, you mentioned Constellation. I mean, have you gotten any more clarity into what you think Ballast Point likely sold for, Chris?
Oh, you mean
Ballast Point
sold back to or whatever?
Yeah, to crooks and convicts.
Yeah.
I mean, God, what a I feel so bad for Ballast Point and any Ballast Point employees who are listening who we snicker with. It's hard not to, but yes.
I think it feel worse for crooks.
Probably a better question for Josh. I mean, I thought it was like, didn't you report something on it? Like it was like 150 million or something like that, or 100 million?
Way less than that.
Yeah.
I had triangulated a figure at one point. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was closer to like 30 million.
Okay.
Oh, that low? Wow.
You know what? Actually, somebody did report it recently, because I think it was in a filing, wasn't it?
I don't remember ever seeing that it was in a filing, but that would be interesting to know if it was, but I never saw it. I was checking the filings for a while and then sort of stopped, to be honest. Looks like Chris is on it. Yeah. Is the idea that they'll run the cannabis business through Sweetwater to some degree, Chris, do you think? Or is that only if at once, the big cannabis drink experiment begins, which obviously Lagunitas has already dipped their toe into? They would run it through, they would do it in that way, or in some broader way would they run the cannabis business through Sweetwater in the U.S.?
So I think a lot of it is like very speculative at this point, which is important to know. We don't know what's going to happen with federal legalization. We don't know, how these products are going to be sold. Right now, obviously, cannabis products need to be sold through the dispensary channel. But it's quite possible, and Afria seems to believe that cannabis drinks are going to be sold through mainstream retail outlets in the future. What that looks like, whether it's like some kind of low dose product and they have some kind of threshold for what can be sold where, I don't know. I mean, you can go to CVS and buy over the counter drugs, right? But you got to have a prescription to get another type of drug. So there could be some kind of structure like that where you can go to a liquor store and you can buy a low dose product. But if you want these, 100 milligram dose beverages, you got to go to the dispensary or whatever.
So I wonder if then the long-term play that they're envisioning is Sweetwater cannabis beer rather than Sweetwater IPA. You know what I mean? Like if we're talking
for the brand you're saying
from now.
I think it's both. I think they intend on bringing their existing brands into the U.S. And then I think it's quite possible they do see value in the Sweetwater brand, from what I'm told. They think that the products that they have, I mean, they have some seltzer product like hydro seltzer or something like that. I mean, all of their
terpene cider,
yeah,
cannabis
seltzer,
So I think that they do see some value in potentially leveraging the brand identities that Sweetwater has created for a cannabis play. But even if that never happens, they still own a brewery that grew production like 7% last year.
right.
And is
One of the few that's like still going and growing. And I mean, we have a Sweetwater rep in Chicago. How many out of state breweries have reps in Chicago right now? Not many. Sweetwater has one.
Is Sweetwater doing anything here? I was surprised to see that they're growing.
They have a rep. I mean, and they've had a rep for years and years. So I don't know. They do decent. I don't think they do that great. I think the fact that they have a rep probably puts them above, other breweries of their ilk.
I mean, they would die in this market without a rep and on Lagunitas' home turf, though.
Yeah. And they have the terpene beers and stuff like that, which people do kind of enjoy and actually do pretty well on draft when draft is allowed, because the entire place smells like weed when you pour a beer, and people are like, it's like the best way to sell popcorn is just to make popcorn because the smell sells itself. That beer smells itself because when it comes out of the faucet, people walk in and say, who is smoking weed right now? Because it's crazy. It is crazy, that beer. So they have that. They are so all in on the culture. They did a collab with Cypress Hill.
No, with Be Real.
With Be Real, right.
Who owns a cannabis company? Dr. Green Thumbs.
Yeah, that's right, Dr. Green Thumbs. And I ended up chatting with Be Real on Instagram for a couple hours, which was crazy. Because I went as Be Real for Halloween one year, and I was like, dude, this is bizarre. He reached out to me because he saw we tagged him in a post, and he was on that. That guy is on social media. I mean, he is on it. Anyway, I digressed.
Well, his guy
I need to name drop. No, this was him, dude. I mean, he was. What's that?
I don't want to show the number.
Oh, I can't.
I got Be Real on the cell phone.
I think I do too now. I think I took it.
Because I talked to him on the phone too. I
didn't talk to him, but I was sending him stuff, and he was following up hey, how's it selling? Have you gotten? And this was on Instagram. I don't know. Maybe he's got an Instagram guy, but anyway, he's got. Yeah, that's right. He's got Dr. Green Thumb. Anyway, who would have thought that? I mean, especially after. So how can Ballast Point sell for, let's say it was 75 million. Let's say it was 175 million, Josh, right? Years after being bought for $1 billion, how can Sweetwater be bought for, you said 350, Chris?
300 million, I think you said. Yeah, that's Sweetwater did incredibly well. I think they strike me as a brewery that was long positioned for this day. They were never going to get 300 million from AB or Miller, or I don't even need to say Constellation anymore.
Hold on. Just want to interrupt you.
Please. Breaking news.
No.
We have news.
Yeah, breaking as of July. I found the number. You were right. It's they ended up selling for 41 million back to Kings and Commons.
Were you seeing that sourced?
Well, I just found it on Twitter, but it's from a filing.
That is insane. That is so sad. That is so sad. So think about that. So they sold for 10 times less.
I want to give proper credit to the tweet. Was Beer Marketers Insights. And they got it from a government filing in March.
Yeah, those guys are on it. They're the original beer journalists.
So for 1/10.
Yeah, 41.1. Look at that.
Of what Sweetwater sold for, which is crazy. Why would they have paid so much for that muffler? Is what I'm guessing. or what I'm asking myself.
I wonder, Chris, does this say a lot about sort of the state of the cannabis business? Is it just in this sort of zealousness right now where craft beer was 5-6 years ago?
Like a tech explosion, just like that kind of tech bubble time where people are just
that thing.
I think you guys are pretty spot on with that assessment. Basically, I think there were a lot of U.S. investors who are very excited at the opportunity that cannabis as a plant and as a product presented, and due to its the illegality of it here in the U.S., they ended up kind of running north and plowing all their money into these Canadian
huge amounts, like the billions right off the bat. It was like Constellation, billions, bang.
And it's turning out that was not the smartest move, for a few reasons. One, so you can go and look at all this stuff, but most of these cannabis companies in Canada have actually, kind of gone through this same process that we kind of saw happen in craft beer, where everyone built all this capacity, and then they were like, what are we going to do with it all now that craft beer is slowed? Cannabis did it at like a 20x pace. They were like, everybody's going to want to smoke cannabis. Let's build out all this cultivation space. And so they built these massive canopies and greenhouses and everything in Canada. And then they opened up the market, and it was like, oh shit, it's more difficult to get people off the black market than we thought. And there's not all this demand, and we have all this weed, and we have all this space to grow weed. So that's what kind of happened in Canada. So they ended up closing a lot of them. All the big companies closed like all their cultivation sites, and just, they had 6, they'd go down to 2, So it was pretty crazy. But, all that money was coming from the U.S. It was U.S. investors. They would have put it into the U.S. if it were legal. If we could have gotten federal legalization passed a couple of years ago, all that money would have stayed here in the U.S. So that's a problem.
How can Constellation afford to just literally take billions of dollars and flush it down the toilet?
They just write it down, and they just write it down every quarter.
I mean, when is crooks and convicts going to buy Constellation for $1? I mean,
are you doing that just to be snarky, calling them crooks and convicts, or
what are they supposed to be called?
They're called kings and convicts.
Convicts. No, I'm not being snarky. I'm just being stupid. Yeah.
I see. I think you're conflating them with crook and marker, maybe.
Maybe.
Crooks and marker.
Kings and convicts. Kings and convicts.
Yeah, I don't think that'll ever happen, but yeah, there was a lot of excitement, and then investors really pumped the brakes over the last 12 to 18 months. We're starting to see it kind of pick back up now. The vape thing was a real big deal in cannabis. Investors got
the vape thing, when it was hurting people's lungs or something.
Yeah, the whole vape crisis thing, midway end of last year, that really broke out. Turns out that most of that was coming from the illicit market. But yeah, it anything can spook an investor in cannabis. The other challenge for cannabis companies is that they just don't have access to traditional financing. So,
right.
Where a craft brewery would just go walk down to their local bank and, get an SBA loan and do all these things to make their dream come true. Cannabis companies can't do that. They have to rely on the private sector, because there are very few, if any, banking opportunities available to them. Some credit unions have lent to cannabis companies, ones that have a little bit higher risk tolerance. But in general, these banks don't want to lose their whatever the FDIC, standing or whatever it is. And that's where we're at. So until we get banking reform passed in the cannabis space, we won't see, that money, start to pick back up, that investment start to pick back up.
Is anyone fighting for that?
What's that?
Is anyone fighting for that, lobbying for that?
Oh yeah. They're going to pick up. Well, they tried to get safe banking through in some of these COVID packages.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like
Smart.
I gotta hand it to like the Republicans, up on Capitol Hill there. Like they're not totally full of shit when they talk about some of this stuff about like there being all this fat in these bills. Like, yeah, like the Democrats were definitely trying to push through like cannabis reform in a COVID package. Like, what was that doing in there? And I get their arguments. The cannabis firms, they need relief too, I guess. But at the same time, they were deemed essential everywhere. So,
right. That's funny.
This is really, I mean, this is a huge win for Sweetwater too, because I think, as we alluded to, that kind of money for that brand was not coming from anywhere. And even if they were going through 7% growth, which, is a good amount of growth, their facility in Atlanta has a capacity for 500,000 barrels. That was what was stated around, I think their expansion was in 2012 or 13, which correlated at the same time that they had like there was a minority stake that was taken in the company, and that correlated with their move into Chicago and into other markets. And so I think if you combine 500,000 barrels potential, which they produced, half of which they filled last year, according to that press release that we saw, and then the additional Old Pyramid, which was how much, like 300,000 barrels or something like that.
That's what I was told, that it could be 400,000 barrels. That could be wrong.
Yeah. So buying a lot of capacity, that's for sure. So between all that equipment. So, I imagine there's I hope that this works out for them, because it's a huge investment. Yeah, you end up with a solid investment in America. Worst case scenario, if legalization doesn't pan out in an immediate term. I think Sweetwater are the winners in this, though, if I'm being honest.
Oh, heck yeah.
100.
I think it's a good deal for both. A couple of points. I'll let you guys, kind of do whatever. But a couple of points I want to make about cannabis drinks in particular, because this deal is very focused on the beverage element of cannabis. In my conversation with Erwin Simon, who's the CEO of Afria, he told me that they're like very bullish on cannabis drinks, THC infused beverages, and that's great. Like, I think I got some here. I've been getting sent samples.
How much is what's the amount per can?
So a lot of these guys are going for low dose.
I think that's the smart way to go. Personally, would be low dose.
Like more social.
What is a low dose?
5 milligrams.
So I would think like 2 milligrams.
Yeah. So this one has 2 milligrams of THC, 2 milligrams of Delta 8, and
don't even know what that
also
is.
THC. So 4 milligrams of THC, it's different cannabinoid, and then 4 milligrams of CBD.
So 4 milligrams per can.
So yeah, 4 milligrams of THC. A lot of them have between 2 and 5 milligrams.
I would think 2 would be kind of if I was a beverage company, I'd be wanting to hit 2, because I think 2 is more like drinking a beer.
Yep. I'd say 2.5 to 5, somewhere in there. And onset times are about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, here's the thing. They're very bullish on the growth of this segment. Why? Because they think that mainstream retailers will be carrying it. If that doesn't happen, the reality is that the dispensary channel is just like not set up for beverage right now.
Yeah, I can't do it. No.
They have like, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 square feet in most of these dispensaries. I don't know what the national average is, but they're not large. And a good portion of that, say a couple 100 to 500 square feet of that, maybe more sometimes, is a vault, right? Where they got to lock up and store these products every night.
And the cash.
You can't, when you walk into a Whole Foods or anything else to pick up your beer, you can pick it up off the shelf. You can look at it. You can touch the can. You can throw it in your shopping cart. When you go into a cannabis dispensary, it's behind a wall. They might display a cardboard package or something, but you can't just pick up these products. Like, they need to be behind a cashier's like a case. You need to be behind.
More like a jeweler's. It's like a jeweler's case.
Yeah.
It's what it's more like.
So it's really not set up. And the other important thing is that like this right here, this is a vape, right? They sell these cartridges. For the listeners, is bad radio, but they sell these cartridges that as a vape cartridge that is like the size of like a finger. I mean,
yeah, like a pinky finger. Yeah,
and this would be $60 to $75 at retail. Like a can of beer, for comparison's sake, or a can of cannabis drinks, this is going to be like $4.
Right.
Why, if you're a retailer, would you store a bunch of these at $4 when you can store a bunch of these at $75 or $60 or whatever it is, $60? Like logistically, it doesn't make sense,
I guess, but
so that's why they need the mainstream retail.
Right. Yes, totally.
So if it doesn't happen,
though, for $300 million, you know,
what's that?
It all sounds pretty speculative for $300 million. And if they're banking on the Sweetwater brand resonating in
somebody's playing with play money,
Philadelphia, I think they're it's maybe overly hopeful.
It's toy money, man. This is investor money. You can tell, like, it reeks of it to me anyway. This is
well, 100
this
million.
This is monopoly money.
Yeah, 100 million of it, I think, is coming from at the market offering. So the public markets will fund it. Additional lenders are from Sweetwater and Afria are funding 100 million. Might have that partially wrong. It might be 50 million coming from the.
So wait, Sweetwater people are buying their own company?
Lenders.
The
relationships that they have with lenders already.
Okay.
100 million in debt from existing Afria and Sweetwater lenders. Another 100 million will come from an at the market offering that Afria has. That's I believe existing. And then I think the other, 50 to 100 million will come from, 50 because it's cash, will come from cash on hand potentially. The other thing with the deals that makes this unique in cannabis, at least, is that $250 million in cash right now in the cannabis M&A space is like you don't see that. All the deals getting done, like it's crazy deal making in cannabis. They're almost always all stock transactions. Almost always. All paper money.
Got it. Yeah, right.
So you guys are right. Like it's
monopoly money.
It's a sweet deal for Sweetwater.
Yeah. Oh, totally. All right. I think we should start winding this down before Josh falls asleep on Zoom, which would be good. Josh, is there anything you would like to say in closing? Anything just you want to just mention before we leave?
I'm just really thankful that my 5 and 2-year-olds are still not smart enough to realize the degree to which I am emptying out their Halloween candy stash every night after they go to sleep, and not even to eat it, just to throw most of it away.
But you take it out and throw it away? What? Yeah. That is brutal. You take your kids' candy and you throw it away.
Well, yeah, because every night they get one piece after dinner, and I don't want to be dealing with this for the next 2 months. So every night I take a little bit out, and they get one piece and one piece, and a few more days we'll be done with it, and then we can move on.
You're a better health parent than I, because my kids, we had to take the bags away because we would just find like handfuls of candy wrappers.
Right. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So I'm just thankful that at 5 and 2, they're not quite up to the task of outsmarting me yet, but I know that in like a year or two,
they're not going to let you throw it out. Oh,
so I'm just going to savor this moment while I have it.
I would throw out their candy over their cold dead bodies. I mean, that's, it would like, there's no way I would throw away that candy. That is like their it's their most prized possession. They're candy boxes right now. They're
I'm
candy
telling
bags.
you, man, though, that like every day, every morning, they're like, I want to look at my candy. And they don't see that I like got rid of 4 or 5 pieces the night before. It doesn't register to them. So there's nothing lost except they're not getting cavities.
And what are you?
And it's one less thing for me to have to fight with them about. That's really the main thing.
Oh, that's funny. Who's next? Anyone
I know,
else?
I'm cruel. You're completely judging me, but that's
No, I'm not. I was going to say something that happened with me and my kid and her tooth, and I heard my kid's tooth. All right, now I'll say it. There you go. So I was thinking about how it's going to sound bad when I describe what actually happened, which was my kids were misbehaving on the bed. My daughter's got this really loose tooth, and what were they doing? They were doing something like bad. And I went to my daughter and I like backhanded her thigh, like this. And she went, oh, and her, like, whatever she did with her mouth, like it spit her tooth out. She had a loose tooth and she just like kind of spit it down. And she was like, when you smacked me, my tooth fell out. And she was going over that. But I just had many disclaimers before I talk about how I beat my child so bad that her tooth fell out.
on her leg, no less.
On her leg, exactly. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Just shot it right out of her. Anyway, anyone else? Final words, Alexi?
Yeah, I encourage people when they're shopping for beer for the rest of the year, slow down when you shop. Don't go to the end caps. Don't go to the cold section. Take your time walking through the aisles. Read the labels. Buy something that looks interesting to you and reads interesting to you specifically, and think about the world of beer beyond your locality, because there is a chance that you may not see it again. And there's great opportunities to be had, and great explorative opportunities and flavor opportunities to be had. So
Awesome.
if I were to say something to everyone, that's what I would say.
That's great. I'll hear to that, Alexi. Chris, anything you want to say?
Yeah, well, real quick on Alexi's point. I mean, I think that's a great concept. One thing I wish would exist at the retail level would be more, point of sale information for the consumer, especially now, like with all the craft beer labels the way that they are. Like,
right.
I can barely find a beer. I'm, supposedly know a lot about beer, right? And I can barely find something that tells me what the hell it's going to taste like now.
That beer that you drank, it tastes like an old man with long hair.
Right. I love the artwork, but please tell me what these hops taste like and tell me what I'm about to experience. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to create something. I don't know if there's an app or some kind of initiative or something to create some point.
Like a store with knowledgeable people who you can talk to. I don't know where you'd find one of those, but anyway.
I mean, I'm lazy. I go down the street. All right.
Yeah, no, I'm joking.
I can't fly to Chicago and pick up my
No, but I hear you.
Don't you deliver to Boston now, Chris, on the same day?
Oh yeah, same day
that?
to Boston. Yeah, well, we deliver same day to Boston.
Amazon Prime it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, no, my final comment would be, I don't want to sound like I'm, so deep into the cannabis world that I've completely left the beer world. I haven't. But I think the beer world saw this deal and said, wow, that's crazy that a cannabis firm bought beer. And I would be lying if I said that I didn't have that like sort of initial moment, like, what the heck is this? And then I took a step back and I said, you know what, like the lines have been blurring for so long in alcohol, just within alcohol and just within beverage, that it's inevitable that this type of thing was going to happen, that we'd, slowly start moving out. You look at what Molson Coors is doing with their non-alcoholic beverages and the investments that are being made by beer companies into cannabis companies. Molson Coors has one too. Like all bets are off now.
Yeah.
We are seeing full-blown consumer packaged goods companies that might have food, they might have beer, they might have cannabis, they might have who knows what they have in the future. So I would say don't be surprised when we start seeing some things that might appear random at first or odd, because I think that's just the way the world is moving.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, I like how you put it earlier, Josh, as you called it, an obituary for Shelton Brothers. I just want to say that I think it's been, it really sucked to see. I wish I could say it was more of a surprise, but a really kind of influential company for me. And I just want to give a last little sip of Driefontein Goose, which I will say, when it's just available to drink, is a wonderful, just like drinking beer. You can drink a whole lot of it, and it's just it goes down pretty easy. So cheers to those guys, and I hope all their beers find a good home, and that we can make them available for people to try, kind of like Alexi was alluding to. I want to thank all my guests. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, guys. We went off topic a little bit, which was great, just enough. I hope to see you guys all on again and all in person soon enough again. But until that, we will see you guys next for more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable, and I will let you, Josh, go and throw away candy. Cheers, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much
everybody.
for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot, man. See you guys. So long.
This is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.